There's so many successful business people with podcasts out there, and it's time to bring them in, pick their brains, learn as much as we can, and share some information. Welcome to It's Not Just Talking. I'm your executive producer, Vince Quinn. I'm here to help you sharpen your podcast strategy, improve your production processes, and build your hosting skills so that you can put more time into your business. And our first guest today ever for It's Not Just Talking is David Sidoni. Now, David is North America's leading advocate for first-time home buyers. He's the founder of the How to Buy a Home platform, which is focused on educating and empowering this ignored area. He's peeling back the curtain as he does all of this to reveal the insider secrets of the home buying process. And by doing so, he's earned enough trust that he has over 1.7 million downloads for the How to Buy a Home podcast. It is the #1 first-time home buyer education podcast. And we talk with him about that right from the jump. Here's our conversation. What we're doing today, we're talking with David Sidoni of How to Buy a Home. And what is so great about David, and I will tell you this to your face, I'm looking into the camera, at your eyes. David, what I love about everything that I've seen with your show and your business is total alignment. Just everything is connected, everything is clean, the branding, like it all makes so much sense. It's all so simple. And so, one, congratulations to you, sir, because I think it takes a lot of people. Some people never find it. Some people have parts of it. So I love that, and that's a great thing. But the most interesting thing, and I mentioned this in the intro for you, 1.7 million downloads for the show, which is incredible. It's a lot of people would be jealous of that number all the same. So, like, what I would love to do is just first understand how this show came about, this big show, and we'll get into all the branding and the other stuff later. But first off, how do you build a podcast that gets to 1.7 million downloads? Where does that start?
Well, I think the good part for the listening audience is that it sure as hell didn't come out in that alignment out of the box. It was absolute trial and error to get there. The whole thing was an accident. I had a passion project that, became this labor of love, and it was something I thought was going to grow my own business in Southern California. And then, thanks to the happy accident of podcasting, it turned into a national brand. And when I originally started, I thought it was going to be more video and YouTube, and then the podcasting happened, and I found out that the passive listening and educate from the education standpoint was so much more engrossing and connective with the audience because they could do it when they were washing the dishes, taking the dogs out on the way to work, whatever. And that's when I really started to figure out what I needed to do. So that's where all the alignment came in. I spent a ton of time. I got super lucky. The original name was going to be the biggest dirty little secret in real estate.
Okay.
Thank God I threw that out the window.
Yeah.
So the name was the first part of the alignment. The next part then was, figuring out how to get the URL. And then the next part was tons and tons of trial and error on social media. And then it was understanding a niche and connecting with the niche and giving them what they want, listening to them. And then the biggest secret I can give you, the one thing I don't like about interview podcasts is the guy talks about, or the gal talks about who they are forever. Okay, here's your cut to the end right now.
Yeah.
Reviews. Period. End of story. That's it. I did trial and error on 100 different things, and there are no views, there are no subscriptions, there are no likes. If you want to get up in Apple Podcasts, it's all about reviews. So what I did was I created a stellar, incredible customer service experience, and every single one of my customers, I'm talking customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, beg, plead, reviews.
Wow. So how do you do that? I mean, just from the basic standpoint, because totally agree, reviews are great. It's it's social proof and algorithms and all that kind. You want good reviews. How do you do that? What is a general process that people could actually adapt from that?
Well, it depends on how business savvy you are. As a lot of podcasters are hobbyists, enthusiasts.
Yeah.
If you haven't gone through the marketing, which I happen to have done beforehand, it's just creating a campaign to talk to your clientele, however you communicated with them to help serve them via text, email, whatever it was, to then follow up with a automated, scripted, thought out campaign where you're asking them for the review. Hey, can you take a minute? Blah, blah, blah. It's always coming from a humble place and a place of gratitude. Fortunately for my particular thing, and I think a lot of people will feel this in sales, whatever you're pushing up the little guy, helping out the people that all us weirdos that like this one nerdy thing, if you're a hobbyist or whatever, it's like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if other people found this rad thing? This is the best way to do it. And then, I went through dozens of different calls to action within my podcast. Because, you go on YouTube and it's hysterical. Everyone's got their, like, subscribe, notification. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that stuff is really big, and you do see it all over your site and everything else. Like, you do a great job with that, too. But I actually want to take it back a little bit because you touch on something very interesting, right? Like, that ability for people to find you and connect with it and go, yeah, this is for me. Like, I should be listening to this show because it's exactly what I need, and I'm getting these referrals that allow me to do it. So, like, before you build this big show and have the whole business and the site and all these systems in place, I mean, how did people find out about this thing early? How did you get that momentum? How did you get people to just put it in their ears?
So originally I put it out for my Southern California people. Podcasts have this weird thing where, hey, guess what? You're global, even though you're doing a thing on, what's happening here in South Carolina or whatever.
Yeah.
So it started with that. I started to get some numbers. One of the things that maybe not every one of your listeners can latch onto, but something that I found was real estate feels like a large, huge pond, but first-time homebuyers is really small. So by concentrating on that, I ended up kind of going up the top of that individual chart. And that was just me, like, looking like crazy at the very beginning. Okay, put in first-time homebuyer into Apple Podcasts, because this was before Spotify had a decent search.
Okay.
And I saw the ones that were there. And so then I started adjusting my titles. And then I was, I was trying to concentrate on that. But by realizing that being a big fish in a smaller pond gave me more opportunity, by being aware of my titles, and then getting lucky, I think I hit in one of the, newcomer things in Apple because their categories were so small. And so that was really great, which is super ironic because the name of my podcast is How to Buy a Home. And I think it was a year ago they made How To a category. But I blew up in this weird, like, business category. So
It's great. I mean, and that's what it's all about, right? Like, that simplicity of, this is a market, this is the exact market. I know what their problems are. I'm going to talk about those problems relentlessly, and by just owning that space, it makes it so much easier to get found. And I think so many business owners, and you've probably seen this because, like, you're on the guest circuit. You've been on different shows and seen this too. Like, there's so many things out there where people like, well, it's a business show, but also I talk about going to the gym, and I talk about some of my family stuff and things I do with my friends. And it's like, okay, I mean, you can do that, sure, but, like, are people going to find you? Are they going to learn anything about your business? Are you promoting your business in any way? Is this going to give you good social media clips that you can put out there, or things that you can turn into a newsletter? Like, it just gets so lost. And to be like, no, this is the thing. This is all I talk about. This is all that I'm doing. I mean, like, how much easier has it been for you as you've continued to build the show and get the momentum and then, like, combine the business around that show? How easy has it been to figure out what kind of things to talk about and connect with the audience? Like, how easy is it to put on a show? You know what I mean?
yes, first of all, I'm going to church with you. Everything you said, amen, amen, amen. I say this on my podcast. Wherever you are right now, hit the rewind button. 15 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it is. Do not try to be everything. I think a lot of business owners think that, you know what, I sell this one particular service, or I offer this one particular service, but people will connect with me if they think I'm a dog owner or a health nut or this or that. I do guest on a lot of podcasts, and I look at some of the descriptions of the podcasts, and they're like, what would you like to talk about? And I'm like, well, considering that you cover 19 topics, here's the 4 that I'm into.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, when the growth, when I realized that the growth was going to come by serving the audience, I listened to a lot of different marketing podcasts. I listened to, a ton of people way smarter than me, got a master's degree in marketing. And the number one thing that I learned through social media, taken with a grain of salt and through the lens of realizing there's a lot of negative crap on social media, we are the luckiest business owners in the world that we get what people used to spend tens of thousands of dollars on focus groups. Live in the comments, baby. That's it. Everything I did. I then got to the point in my business where if a customer raised their hand, if somebody said, yeah, I'd like help with this, I would not let them come in to me until they had filled out a basic questionnaire. And within that questionnaire is always, what did you find most valuable in the podcast? So when I run out of stuff, I'm looking at comments and I'm looking at people asking their answers to that question.
Okay, now why do you do that? So why are you making sure that people listen to the podcast? And to take it even a step further, I noticed that on your website, like the one thing is find a unicorn for you, right? This
Yes.
realtor that will go to work for you. And I thought it was very interesting because your first step is to listen to the podcast. Then your second step is to go and get the realtor, which I think most people would see that and go, well, at that point, I'm selling, baby. It's sell time. This is direct. Like, come to me. So why are you sending people to the podcast first? What's your thought process behind that?
Well, I could get really deep into understanding market share and my individual consumer. So for me and my individual consumer, they are overlooked, disrespected, and there are a million of them every year. I don't need a million to have fun and enjoy my life and make money. So what I try to do is offer the most authentic education and empowerment process first. It's, Gary Vaynerchuk, jab, 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 right hook. It's give to get. That's the old, Zig Ziglar. And that's always been my process. I don't care if 10,000 people listen to my podcast, figure out what to do and go do it on their own and never actually go through my system. Because that means 20,000 people will go into it and go, dang, this is complicated, and then ask me for help. And so for me, for my individual business, creating an authentic, transparent, education-first platform was a way to develop a business as long as I had a intense back-end system created, which there was all this podcast stuff, but then there's this whole building a back-end system to go from my aligned website into actually getting the customers. But yeah, it was just a choice, I'm an old dude, so I was like, I want to give back. And can I make money when I give back? And so, yeah, I just give it away for free, but with a business system behind it. I also happen to be in a business where, like, the top people in my business don't give a damn about these people. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, so you identify that, you build the show around that, you're connecting with those people and promoting it to those people, you're living in the comments section, and then you get to this point, like, when does the stage hit for you where you realize, like, oh, like, this is much bigger than I thought it would be, and I do need to start, like, building a business around it. When does that really hit for you? What is that like?
So first year was fun. Had a few people that reached out to me, great. Second year was COVID drama. Third year, post COVID in 2021, suddenly about once a week, I started getting, hey, I really like the education you're giving. Do you know anybody like you in Nashville, Chicago, Seattle, Portland, Dallas? That's when I reached out to my network and I started to realize that there was a referral system in here. And so that year, we ended up having multiple people that we did matchmaker with. And that's when I went, oh, this is the business. The podcast is the business. And then that's when I went really deep into the marketing of the podcast, started looking at my thumbnail, I actually spent gobs of money on advertising. And at the end of a year, my business was up 291%. But the ROI was absolute break even. and I didn't have another chunk of gobs of money anywhere.
Yeah.
But the brand was built to a place that now I could just really dig into the comments. And, and now I'm at a place where one of the things that I have that's interesting is it's an evergreen. So my audience is recycling.
Mhm.
So sometimes I'll pop on but what's fantastic now is if you build a podcast with a library of stuff and nobody listens, keep going. Because someday you're going to be able to say, hey, so there's other people out there that have, there are other people out there talking about this. They might have one episode in their podcast that's about, like we talked about, 15 things. My
Yeah.
podcast is about this one thing. And yeah, they don't know nobody listened to episode 5. But when you're in episode 150 and you can go, well, I got a question about this, but I talked about that in detail in episode 5. That's the authenticity and the verification that you are a longtime guru and someone that's been involved in this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that. Like, even for me, because I'm just now re-dipping my toe into the guesting pool, right? I'm putting a lot more time of looking at different shows. All right, where do I want to be? What are those shows? What do they look like? And the longevity does matter. Like, I don't want to go on a show necessarily that's only been going for like 6 months. I don't have a guarantee that they're going to still exist. So it's like, okay, well, if I see somebody that, even if they don't have a ton of listenership, but they've been doing it regularly for 2 years, 3 years, whatever, it's like, all right, I know you're a diehard, I know you're consistent about this, you care about it, and you're probably doing the basic promotional things that make it worth my time to engage with you and your audience. And that kind of longevity, yeah, and like other values too. I don't know if you've done any of this stuff, but like being able to say, yeah, here's a great episode from the vault, let me go republish it, or getting the clips from that episode. You might have had a killer clip from an episode 2 years ago that's still evergreen and that's still totally hit. So you know what? Throw it up again. Like there's so much value to get over the long haul of this. So yeah. So I mean, when that pops up, like, do you have certain times when you're talking? Are you just sending them back? Like, if a client has a question, can you like, hey, here's this episode. I actually covered that for 45 minutes. You should go listen to that. I feel like that's a very nice, clean avenue.
So when you're at the place where you have a catalog and a library and a vault, one of the things that I am consistently doing is exactly that. I have an individual place where we have things listed, and I am constantly referring back to, hey, if you need more detail on that, go here. I have been so building exactly what you're talking about for a year, where individual video clips, they're there, I've got them, but my gigantic, super expensive hard drive that I bought that's completely full, we've repurposed things. So what I'm doing in 2025 is taking a ton of time to repurpose the video clips of the podcast to answer all the questions that I got from the comments and the surveys. Like 400 answers to questions. Rather than me texting back or typing, go, oh yeah, I talked about it here. Here's the clip. Boom. 60-second clip.
If you're listening to this, chances are that your business podcast is struggling, but you're not sure what's holding it back. That's why I created the Podcast Compass Quiz. And in just 5 minutes, you'll get clarity on what's working, what's not, and where to focus your energy next. Best part? It's completely free. So hit the link in the show notes to take the quiz now. That's amazing. That's good for you. Like, that is such a great place to be. And we're pretty new in getting the show off for ourselves, but what I want to build is a category of, like, let's say a lot of common questions that I get in the sales process, right? Things like, well, what's a return of investment on a podcast, for example? People ask me that kind of thing. It's like, okay, well, I did an episode on that. Like, those are the exact kind of things that I'm looking to solve. And I'm on the opposite side of it, where right now I'm looking ahead and seeing that I need to record those things, and I'm planning to record it with that explicit purpose. So it's totally the way to go. And for anybody that's listening, like, if you have those kinds of things, like common questions you get from customers that you can answer ahead of time and do it in a very thoughtful, prepared way, and just have that on repeat. Like, how much time do you save, do you think, for like, just from what you were talking about a minute ago, of sending people like, hey, here's the link, instead of calling them and explaining or writing an email? It's got to be like an insane amount of time.
A huge amount of time. I mean, for my particular business, which is helping people with the most confusing thing they're ever going to do in their life. Buying your first home is the most massive adulting thing you can ever do. And so I have been in situations where you might have certain customers that come in and you just know, okay, this is an analytical person. this is a person I'm going to need to spend more time with. In real estate, we call them engineers, because God bless you all. You know that's you, engineers. So when they come to us, we're prepped for that. So, but like everything in business, you say, okay, that's going to be a little bit of extra time, but at the end of this, I know I'm going to get a great return. I did a 2-part episode on the National Association of Realtors lawsuit last year when it happened. One of the people that I referred out to one of my unicorns, the unicorn called me and said, hey, that guy you sent me, just want you to know, we've been working for a year. He's super analytical, going deep into everything, spreadsheets for everything. And I was like, no worries, I get it. And then she goes, oh my God, he wants to talk to me about the buyer contract, the new thing that happened because of the lawsuit. I have to call him right now. So she put aside like an hour and a half of her day. He goes, hey, when are you going to send me that thing? And she's like, okay, well, let me explain it. He goes, no, David did 2 episodes on it. I got it. Just send it over. DocuSigned it in 2 seconds. So understanding, now that was me prepping for questions I knew were going to come. Straight up, man, it's all in the comments. Like, you should be able to go in the comments and go, I should do that. I should do that. I should do that. I used to use Answer the Public a lot. That was what I did in the beginning. And, but you've got, I have reconnaissance Instagram channels. I have reconnaissance YouTube channels where I'm going and I'm searching as if I am them, and I'm seeing what questions are being answered correctly or incorrectly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's absolutely the easy. Everyone's like, what are you going to do? Like, you're 300 episodes in. I'm like, I'm just going to keep answering. To me, it's like a radio talk show now. I'm just answering questions.
Yeah, it's how it should be. And as somebody who comes from radio, and that was my job for 10 years, that's how it goes. You try to answer and discuss the things that people are most interested in, and how do you do that consistently? So yeah, you read the room. But well, go ahead. It looked like you had something on that. You look, or was that?
I was going to say, step 1 is all that alignment stuff that you brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Establishing yourself as the authority. Step 2, talk show.
Yeah. And so it just becomes so simple, because at that point, like, you've built up the messaging, right? Like, the amount of time that you've been able to put into talking about all these different topics, having nuanced opinions about that, knowing how it impacts people, clients you've worked with, and related stories in that sense of, hey, well, in this situation, I worked with this person, we did this thing, that's why I think this way, you get these results. Like, it's so good to build up that catalog and have experience, and then it just becomes easy to translate everything that you talk about, because it's all the things you're passionate about anyway. Like, going back to the same thing, those podcasts with 15 different topics. Like, talk about what you know and what you care about, and what relates to your customer that they care about. Like, how do you just get those things in one place and do that consistently? That's all it needs to be. But people tend to overcomplicate it. So I love your simplicity, your messaging. And actually, one thing with messaging I do want to touch on and go back a little bit, because you've mentioned unicorns. I think I mentioned unicorns. You have a unicorn above your head. For the people who are listening, David has great studio set up, and there are all these cool shelves and lighting behind him. There is a picture of a unicorn above your head. So can you explain unicorns, please, and then why you chose unicorns? Like, what goes into that?
So, but before I get into the unicorn, I will also point out, this is a can of Spam. That was me listening to the comments. The number one thing first-time home buyers hate about the process is getting spammed. So there was a Saturday Night Live sketch during COVID when they were talking about Zillow as like Zillow porn. And they're all like, oh, because there's nothing to do. And then they accidentally hit a button, and then the realtor keeps calling them over and over again. And they're like, stop. So spam. So the unicorn was something that came out of the podcast. Originally was educate, empower, help. For me, that was going to mean, instead of me going to Starbucks to meet buyers in Southern California for me and my team and sitting down for 45 minutes, I could say, hey, like we were talking about earlier, listen to this episode. This is the number one questions that people ask. Oh, wait, listen to this episode. This is about using your retirement funds, because I know you mentioned that in our phone call. So what I was planning on doing was reducing those meetings at Starbucks and making them more efficient, because on their breaks, they could listen to this.
Yeah.
And then what happened was everyone from around the country went, "Who's like you?" Well, a couple decades in real estate, I happen to know a lot of great people, so I started matchmaking people. And at one point in the podcast, it was an evening, it was a morning after I'd been like watching Sports Center before bed, and they were talking about some guy who was, 285 pounds and ran a 4.40, and they called him a unicorn. And as a guy who loves musical theater and sports, I always love it when they use weird terms like that.
Yeah.
So I laughed and I was like, so then I brought it up and I was like, yeah, they're the magical, mythical being of a real estate agent that has experience, yet empathy and compassion for first-time home buyers and wants to work with them. And then it became a thing. And so now that is one of a bazillion trinkets that I have now sent to me. It gets sent to me all the time. But it was creating that that exclusivity, marketing and business 101.
Yeah, and so being able to define all of that and connect. So and you mentioned earlier, I mean, a master's degree in marketing, right?
I do not have a master's degree. I am saying, thanks to the wonderful world of podcasting, I got a master's degree in marketing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realized when I started, I mean, I've gone to spend a lot of money, gone to high-level workshops, seminars, but you absolutely, using podcasts, can learn more. There's a 6-week, $3,000 Google tech course, computer science course that is, everybody says, don't get a 4-year degree, do that 6 weeks, and Google will hire you with a 6-figure job immediately. And so I said that in that I want people to understand you can learn. I feel like I have one, and taking nothing away from all the people who went to school, God bless you. But in a changing social media world, you got to keep up.
Well, yeah. And so I know, like, talking about the show and promoting the show and using the marketing strategies there, like you mentioned the titles and being particular about that, thumbnails. Like, what are some of the things from seeing so many podcasts? Like, what do you think works? What are one of the biggest things that works for you in promoting the show, marketing the show? And is there anything that you see that people commonly do that you're like, that's a mistake?
It's tough to say, but there are a lot of repurpose houses out there now. And I used to use them. One of the guys I listen to all the time is Gary Vaynerchuk, and, take it or leave it, use the pieces you like, whatever. But one thing I can say is I don't have a staff of 27 people that are constantly monitoring what works, what doesn't work when it comes to social media posts. Is it a text time? Is it a carousel time? Is it, but the main thing I see is too many people not understanding the hook of social media, not understanding the scrollability. If your first 3 seconds isn't interesting, entertaining, stop introducing yourself. Stop starting with, hey, everybody, even, hey, everybody, here's something quirky. No, here's something quirky. That's the number one thing I see. Probably those audio bar things. Hi, thank you, 2019. Stop
Yeah.
that. It's got to be video. It's got to have captions. What is it, like 80 or 90% of the people watch social media with the sound down?
Yep.
So it's got to have captions. And then, like, getting really deep into it, stop promoting your episode. Show me a chunk and educate. Jab, 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 right hook. Jab, jab, jab. Give. Mention.
Yeah, I think that's huge because the whole thing is, people are always like, oh, well, I've got this new episode. Check it out. I talk about this thing, and this thing. And like to have the approach of, here's this thing. Let's talk about this thing for 30 seconds. Like, here's 2 paragraphs about this thing and what you can learn from it, how you can interact with it and incorporate it into your life. Let's say it's LinkedIn, right?
You said the 3 words I never say. Check it out. Boo. Boo. Stop saying check it out.
Yeah.
Check it out. It tastes like chicken. Knock it off. Yes, I absolutely give it knowledge nuggets.
Yeah, it's like, set it up. Here's all give people real value. Let them take something away from that post, and then when you close it, you go, if you want more, if you'd like to dive deeper into this topic, here it is. Like it's a nice, natural, smooth transition. You've earned the trust and you've already given them information. It's a reason to go and want more. And it doesn't feel like you're spamming their feed, and we'll point to the shelf. No spam.
Yep.
We don't want to be spamming people. So yeah, like that is definitely the approach, and it makes things so much simpler. But let me ask you about this, David, because like you've talked about so many great things, and what I mentioned earlier is you have different materials and like the course, and you've got the PDF guide. Like, what is there a relationship between those things and the podcast? Like, how are those things connected, and how does the podcast relate to them in terms of like your broader marketing strategy?
So the podcast was the base, and it's hysterical. I'm formulating my answer in my head, and I'm realizing it's a culmination of everything that we've talked about to answer your question.
Look at that.
So it's the podcast is the base, and then the vault, the catalog, the library is something that basically after 100 episodes, I was like, okay, that's everything. That's me giving you all the insider secrets. That's everything you need to know. And then the rest of the time, I'm giving market updates and insider secrets based on current market conditions.
Mhm.
So at one point, I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the buy now button? Well, the buy now button is ask me for a unicorn. If you interview them and they work, then I get a small referral fee on the back end. Only when they close. There's no prepayment or anything like that. So that's my buy now button. And that has to be systemized to death because I need to do tens of thousands to even make any money, So, 5 years in and I'm living on a dream. We're still not profitable yet. Coming. But then I went, okay, what's the second step? Well, ask me directly. So there's an Ask David button. And that has been really simple because I have the information. So people reach out to me. One of the best things about podcasting on Instagram, encourage the heck out of people asking you questions on Instagram, because Instagram in the messaging has a thing you can press record and talk. So people ask me a question, I send them a voice memo back, and it's like Timothy Chalamet called them, because I've been in their ears for 25 hours. It's the best. One of the stupidest little things I found with podcasting was the audio DM function on Instagram. And then the other thing is the starter kit. Now, the starter kit is people asking me, hey, I want to know the 10 things to do. It's a 7-day series, but in that series, you get an email, and in that email, I refer you to 3 or 4 podcasts that break down everything for step 1 and step 2. And then on day 2, it's an email for step 3 and step 4, where I go through, like the first day is credit. And then the next day might be, finding your team, choosing a lender, but they're all here are 5 episodes to listen to. This sounds like genius marketing. It grew from the accidental place of me going, people don't do enough research to do this big important thing. And so the only way I could do it was with this giant podcast. Well, guess what? Oops. Now it turned into a pretty good marketing idea.
Well, it's amazing. And that's the kind of thing I'm actually thinking about for myself right now, because one of the things that I do, like one of the biggest issues that I deal with is people who start a podcast, but they don't have that alignment, right? They just start a show. They've got ideas. They kind of mimic what they see. It's all over the place. It's not connected to their business necessarily, so they're not promoting their services. And then they've been doing the show for a year, 2 years, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like this, I'm putting in this work, and I want it to work, but it's not working. So now I've kind of got to backtrack and fix that problem that's really based on how they launched. And then for other people, like everybody wants to start a podcast, right? So helping them to start. But it's all about that idea, like I built out this whole process. It's the 9 steps to start a business podcast. I go through that. I do live events based on that show. We are making content based on that show. And like I'm working towards getting to that point of here's this automation, and it's 9 days. Each day is a step. You get the content. So like, yeah, it's so smooth. So like seeing everything that you're doing honestly is aspirational. And like the Ask David button, honestly, was one of my favorite things about your site because it is so simple and so inviting. And I think that's one of the hardest things that people struggle with. Like, I'm going to go on a tangent for a second here, but I'm going to bring it back around. So, like, I was on, when I was in my early 20s, mid-20s, I was on dating websites, right? And I could not get any woman to message me for the life of me. And I would send them messages, and I would hardly get anything back. I'd go on some dates, but like I was working for it. You know what I mean? I was getting leads, and I was placing calls, and I'm doing my thing. And I've deleted profiles and reset and like all that
Oh
stuff.
my
Right? I
God.
went through all the phases, and the biggest change for me that actually led to me consistently having women who expressed interest was that when I made my profile, which was now like the fourth time that I was making a dating profile and page for myself, I named my account Say Hi to Vince. And all that did was it told women to literally say hi. And that was it. And between that and then I had like some radio grabby debate stuff like, oh, NSYNC is better than Backstreet Boys. And you know what I mean? Like some hot takes to generate a conversation. But between doing those two things, like just it literally inviting women to say hi directly was such a game changer. And like it's so more inviting than like set up a free 10-minute consultation. You know what I mean? Like people don't want that. They do want it to feel natural. And so I just love that. And I would imagine that you because you place it all over the site too, which is great. Like you're giving people multiple entry points to go and do that. Like your inbox, I would imagine, is pretty busy.
Oh, it's absolutely part of my day. And that's the fun part. I've built the back end enough to be scalable so I could double right now, and I could still do it from 8 to noon. And that's partially because I have a knowledge. It's partially because I'm building that quick link database. Here I talked about it there. Here I talked about it there. But okay, so get your repurposing editing piece together because I'm about to give you a commercial right now. So, as a podcaster myself, one of the great things about talking with you is I feel this mutual energy that I know so well, which is I have so much information about this topic. Just like I know you have so much information about the business podcasting topic, yet we have to talk in sound bites. So the best way for people to get that information from you is to dig deeper into your content. But you have the authority and you've established that with what you're doing.
That's the game, right? It's just let me short, clean, concise, and then you do it as many times as you can. Hopefully, by the 8th time they've seen your clip on whatever platform, they're like, "Yeah, I'm actually going to do it now because they have earned my trust, and I do see them regularly. I don't forget that they exist." So yeah, for us, it's just like, how can we produce so much content that people can't ignore us? Like awareness was such a big deal because we're niche, man. I mean, we are a business podcast production company. We are very niche. So like not many people need us, or if they are interested, it's going to be a while before they actually make the commitment to start a show. So it's just like, yeah, you got to hammer it. You got to hammer it consistently. You have to be unignorable in terms of what your brand is. And that was a big issue that we had. It was like, well, we're doing social media stuff. Like we would just run accounts and we went to locations and took pictures and like did video with nice B-roll. And like, that is not what we do anymore. You know, it's just like, it was all this distraction. It was all this mess. It's all these different processes. It doesn't help you. And so it was like, all right, what is the core of what this business is about? How can we just lean into that relentlessly? And to an extent, and this is what everybody should be thinking at home, is how can I be more like David, right? Like, how can I have the simplicity of this is the branding, this is the message, you can find it anywhere, it's easy to connect with me, you know exactly what I'm doing, you can explain me to your friends easily. Like, those are all the things that you want. You've got all those things. It has been such a joy talking with you. Like, I knew this conversation was going to be fun. We've gone so many places, covered so much ground. Your insight is great. I'm sure people are taking a lot away from this. And so what I want to do, just before I wrap it up, first off, any things that we haven't touched on just related to you and the business that you think like, might spark you or might be a good takeaway for people at home? Just any final notes, if you will.
I think gearing back to what we were just talking about, the niche of what you do is the business podcast. I think there are a lot of hobby podcasts out there that you can launch and have fun with and do your thing. If you're a business podcast, I cannot stress enough to you how much doing the pre-planning and having a podcast production company working with you before you begin. Exponentially, I would have exploded. I got my first company by luck, I think 10 or 20 episodes in. after, I was doing Anchor for a little while by myself as like an extra thing. And then when I started working with the company, it was like, oh, and then I've been through a few, and now I've got my creative team that does it for me. But I think probably the biggest thing is, if you are a business person listening to this podcast, spend more time prepping before you do your first 10 episodes, and do it with a strategy. Congratulations that you know stuff. Everybody knows stuff. Don't just think that you can spit it into a microphone and people are going to come find you. Have a plan.
So there you have it. And Dave, for the people who need to buy a house and need your plan, so how do they find you? How do they get in touch?
Speaking of lucky things, some idiot sold me howtobuyahome.com like 3 years ago for only a couple grand. So thank you, person who decided to auction and sell that to me. Howtobuyahome.com, everything's there.
So go to howtobuyahome.com if you're looking for a house. David, you have been spectacular. It's been so much fun. You're actually our first guest that we've ever had on the show, by the way. So this is a high bar for anybody to clear. Yeah.
Whoa.
You're guest number 1.
I'm honored.
So thank you for being on the show, everybody. Yeah, make sure you follow David, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter to get more podcast insights. That link is in the show notes. And if you're feeling stuck with your podcast, let's figure it out together. Book a free 10-minute chat with me. The link to do that is also in the show notes. Talk to you next week.